And we're live, folks.
You're good?
Just a second. Yep, good to go.
Awesome. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Beyond Code, where we try and uncover journeys of folks who come and ideally come from various diverse background and today lead and are sitting at lead positions across multiple organizations. Today we have with us Samir, who currently is the director and head of engineering at Acuity Knowledge Partners. Thanks a lot, Samir, to join for joining us today.
Glad to be here. Thank you very much, man.
Awesome. To give a good background and quick background of Samir, Samir has over 18 years of experience in the world of software and application design. He is known to actually lead team members above 100 and ultimately handle budgets up to $3 million in terms of execution. However, the most interesting part that Samir has brought in is he is a leader who comes from no major background in terms of colleges or cities. Today, as we were discussing before this particular call, Samir manages a team back in Delhi and Bangalore from his place in Dehradun. He travels. So he's someone that we would love to understand how he's actually been sitting at such a large and well-known organization and leadership position, coming from not so well-known places. So Samir, it will be an interesting journey to uncover. I'm pretty sure, and viewers today would really enjoy the whole discussion that we're going to have in the next 1 hour. So to begin with, Samir, very standard question that we often ask, and obviously we all look back and we want to be as curious as a child is. So how was your childhood? How did your parents or your teachers look upon to you? Were you sitting in the bench, in the first bench, or you were the ones on the last bench, really making a tough time for the teachers?
Oh, great question. So yeah, I think all my life I've been a backbencher. At least during my school days, probably my academics in schools were not something to be really talking about. I was probably an average student. While my parents would have hope from me, but my teachers in the school would not have, right? So so school time is something that I'm not very proud of, to be honest. When I reflect back, I think I wasted my school time. I should have done better. Hopefully, I would have been at a different place. But my college time, of course, is something that I'm very, very proud of. It gave me, it gave me a purpose. It gave me a reason. And while I stayed a backbencher, but I started to have good hopes, high hopes for myself because I knew I can do it. And I think that's what is a wonderful part of my journey so far. So academically, I believe you should not write off somebody. If they don't show you some symbols, some signs early on, because person's life can change at any point in time. Really.
Got it. Interesting. So something that a lot of teachers that it's not always the school which decides what you're going to do. While it has an impact, but it may not have an
Absolutely.
everlasting impact. Interesting, Samir. So interestingly, as you grew and I think you went on to really have a schooling in Dehradun, and I saw that as a small mention in your profile as well. So what was your first experience of tech? How did actually you came across technology and got exposed to that?
Right. So um, I think there used to be this a television program on DD National back in the day, and it was hosted and run by Dr. Sugata Roy. He's a very well-known computer scientist from the early days. Um, I think he was associated with NIT for a very long time, and I think NIT was sponsoring that program. So it was that program which probably introduced me to computers for the first time. And then, I was able to get enrolled in a computer class in school early on, I think grade seven. And since then, I became very, very fascinated with technology. Though I wanted to do something else as a career, I wanted to be in merchant navy, after my 12th. But then probably the destiny had something else in store. So eventually, I decided to make it a full time profession. So another aspect of what drew me to computers early on was my father's office, um, while I was in grade sixth, seventh, they brought in the first computer there. And I think my physical introduction to a computer was that. It was a monochrome screen, very small, 10, 12 inches, clunky keyboards and all of that. But computer rooms back then, they were treated very, very differently, right? So we had to, we have to put off our shoes,
Shoes. Yeah, absolutely.
go into
That's the
the
memory.
only place in the whole office that was air conditioned was that room, closed, dark room kind of environment. And it was running a software called Tally, right? It was because they used it for accounting purposes. And I played my first computer game there. So it was a billiards pool game. So that basically, that first interaction with the machine, that first interaction with the keyboard, and I was able to use the mouse, though it was the Windows 3.1 interface, but it still, it just immediately triggered that sense of, yeah, this is something that I want to really be part of. Hooked me up to taking computers as a subject in school, and then from class 7th onwards I had it as a subject till I did my +2. And I did really well in that because the inclination, the interest was towards that. So I was good in C programming, and I think that kept me going on. And hence, that also became a very important reason for me to essentially move over into computer applications and then build career in it.
Interesting. I think one of the also highlights that I went in, and obviously I'll have that question for you, is majorly when you say you went on to basically build your career in technology. A standard way back then is engineer bano, right? That's what since I personally have been born and brought up in Patna, so we only had two options: either you're an engineer or a doctor, right? But interestingly, your career takes another switch, and you went on to do BCA in terms of doing a BTech, right? What was that trigger? Wasn't that a pressure कि BTech ही करना है, BCA में क्या है? Because BCA back then I don't think so would have been well known as a subject which ultimately, and all of us belong to that middle class जहाँ पे job security somewhere seems to be one of the paramount importance of our parents to judge whether we are doing the right career or not. So what's your trigger for that?
Right. So I think, well, the credits. So a couple of triggers really. So one, I wasn't very good in mathematics, right? And maths is something which gets you into BTech, to be honest, right? At least to the good colleges. And we never had the penetration of the engineering colleges that we have today, right? So back in the day, so 18 years ago, probably 25 years ago, when I was completing my graduation, so 12th, we didn't have the luxury of having engineering colleges close to my place, for example, right? So the only option was I will have to leave home, go and probably stay in a hostel or something. So, and I was not good at math, so there was no way I would have cracked JE or something else, right? So and I was not interested in doing that too. So I knew my pluses and the minuses very well. So I was not going to waste my parents' money into filling up every application form and then not going through. Second aspect was I come from a humble background, right? So my parents were never plush with cash, and it was a great thing, to be honest. Now that I realize that they weren't, because we understand the value of money and the hard work, etc. So I was not encouraged, to look out for options outside of my city, because that would have just meant, additional money going into sustaining myself out of the city, etc. So when I passed my 12th, the only options were go to a regular degree college, do a BSc or something else, and then, start the job hunting, or identify something, which is not very money consuming, or which is not costly, get a decent professional education, and see what can you make of yourself after that. And then that's how I started to look out for options. BCA turned out to be really the great option, because curriculum matched what I wanted to do. Wanted to stay in computers. That gave me a great platform. And I just jumped at that opportunity. And I joined the first decent college that I could find, and that again turned out to be a great decision. I haven't looked back since then.
Interesting. So what you've actually been into, that sometimes scarcity, as you mentioned, can really change and really basically help you out. It's interesting to know that, but wanted to also understand, and when you look back and think, there's something which is called peer pressure, right? And you might have friends who would be saying engineering kar lo. I somehow assume that you fairly been a very mentally, and you had the way you talk right now is fairly calm and patience. I assume you had a similar patience, or was it somewhere that what was the trigger? Didn't you get carried away uh, across through the whole societal or anything? How did you predominantly handle yourself back then?
Well, I think I'm the eldest, right? We are two siblings. I'm the eldest, so the elder child usually is more grounded, more more mature, so to say. So since you see things, firsthand, and then as you grow, parents, start to have expectations that you will understand, the other child might not, right? So, though my brother is very, very grounded as well, by the way. So I think, that, so the elder child matures faster, is what I think, and when I believe, I have seen things, very closely of how my parents, whose earning were very, very limited, but then their only goal in life was that they would like to give us the best of the education possible. Right. So, and when they were trying their best, to help us sustain with the very limited income that they had, yet, striving to give me the best education possible, I thought, comparing myself with other people, or, putting that peer pressure back into the family, and, pushing my parents to do more for me, was not the right thing. And I think, early days of, those situation, or experiencing those situations early on, probably gave me the right base, right? That I still don't compare myself to anybody else. And I still believe in, trying to identify what best can you gather without having to really, spend the kind of luxuries, or spend the kind of money that somebody else is, in order to, garner that experience. So I think those early experiences of my life probably were helpful enough for, for keeping me grounded, and not let that peer pressure sway me into something which would not have ended up into, something good.
Interesting. So, while you were saying, and you also mentioned that you went on to basically the best of college that was as per your current situation that you had, you went on to basically join, right? What was your major learning? What would you say that were the highlights, that though you were not in one of the fancy colleges that we have in the country or in the city, but still you took a lot out from that particular college. How exactly and what exactly did you say that these were something that has stayed with you till today?
That's a great question. So I think, by the way, that college is now a university, and is very, very fancy, very well known. But then, yeah, back in the day, it was the best option that I had, right? And I think the one of the fundamental reasons of why we opted for that college was because it was run by an engineer himself, right? So not many people from the engineering trade get into academics, right? To run academics or education as a business. But this individual, after his graduation, after his BTech, he wanted to only, get into education, to be honest. And I think that made all the difference, to be sure. That college was run not as if it was a shop, that was to generate money for the owners, but it was really run as a mission. Environment there was that you were free to do, what you want to do. They, within their limited, within their constraints, they were able to gather the best teachers, the best academics that they could have afforded. They were also able to, gather all the different facilities, right? Limited in many senses, but all the best facilities that, were made available. So we had access to the computer labs, for example, 24/7, right? So we only had about 20 computers, but then, they were available 24/7. So people used to manage time, right? So for example, I used to come and do programming mostly in the nights, along with a lot of other people. So when you start getting that kind of an environment where people are getting, and they're coming from, for the very purpose that they want to be successful, I think the environment changes, right? And that environment starts to push you to do better. And it was that competitiveness, that we saw, and that was also encouraged, that pushed me, to cross certain boundaries, certain hesitations that I initially had, and made me what I am today, to be honest. I attribute whatever success I have achieved so far, two major things. One, all the efforts, hard works, and sacrifices that my parents made. And second, the teachers and the environment and the mentorship that I got in this particular college.
So, as far as I understand, this college also was the sole point of you starting your first job. As far as I understand, you were hired in Birlasoft as something which so I think it also laid down you to start your career also. So, how was your experience back then, and what do you think? If I would ask that, there would be certain things that you feel that you could have done better in your first job, or what was your learning? How did your first experience all together from the whole land? I think you moved on to Delhi after when you moved started your job, right? So it would have been a completely different culture that you went on. It's a lot of learnings. How did your first few years in your career start with?
Um, well, it was a very, very mixed experience, to be honest. We were very fortunate that we hopefully was the first batch, from the college that got placed. So very grateful for that. Otherwise, I was always of the opinion that हमको तो खुद ही गड्ढा खोद कर पानी पीना है, right? So college ठीक है, but degree मिल जाए उसके बाद we'll see, how can we get a success. But very fortunate, very grateful that we were first batch, 7 people from the college from my same batch who got placed in Birlasoft. And Birlasoft was an amazing platform, to be honest. It was a mid-size, small size tier 2 IT services company. They were also getting started, right? So we probably joined at the right time. I joined the company when there were about 2,000 people. And my first project was a Sarkari project, right? And as Sarkari projects go, there were tons of challenges, that we were faced with. And initially, those first few years into the company actually provided me a lot of opportunities with regards to identifying, what does success looks like, what are the things that we should be looking at to succeed, what we should do, what we should not do as well, right? And one of the traits that I have in me is that I try to learn from others' mistakes, right? So why to repeat mistake if I have seen somebody else failing or not succeeding by doing a certain thing? So I try to do that a lot, right? And the platform that I got right out of the college was great. So it gave us everything that you need to solidify the foundations, really. So I stayed with that company for almost 5 years before switching, right? And I was very clear in my mind that I will not, go by the greed of getting a few more bucks and or switching into a bigger brand or something like that. At least not in the first few years. And I was able to sustain that. So it was a great platform. It was a very open culture, where people from higher management were very approachable. They ran several programs, for example, to identify next set of leaders and then put people on accelerator tracks. Glad I was able to get into one. So it seems like my stars probably started to align when I was getting out of college. So really speaking, not a lot of people are able to get into that kind of a state, that they don't have to really struggle very much. My struggle, I did struggle, but it was not that I had to run here and there to even get a job. So getting that first break makes a lot of difference. And today people are spoiled for choices, right? So many colleges today are able to offer placements, and they are able to even offer multiple job offers, right, to one candidate. And I think that situation is very, very good to be in. But for people who land their first job and they don't find it in their favorite companies or favorite brands, I think if you land a job, that's the most important thing that should matter, really, right? When you're starting out, and grab it with both hands, and then start to make your own path, right? But at the same time, do do keep in mind that you should also give back to that company that gave you the first break, because it is not just a stepping stone that you jump, get into, and then after a year say tata bye bye, right? Give it back, because when you give back, right, companies also realize, and they may open several other doors for you, which may not be immediately visible otherwise.
Right, absolutely. So one thing that I would like to actually want to ask deeper in you when you say I absolutely second the fact that someone who is starting, it's like a baby when it's taking a first step. The one who's helping you do that matters the most. While it's also important that you mentioned that you were very clear on the fact that you didn't want to really make a switch and you wanted to go deep, right? 5 years, something which allows you, which ultimately must have allowed you to navigate through the internal channels, really understand the organization. So my last boss often used to tell me that 2 years में तो company समझ में आती है, लोग छोड़ देते हैं, right? And that's been some of the trend that we ourselves today managing teams often struggle, right, with obviously the early stage folks. So what do you think would your piece of advice, and what do you think if you would actually go back and think that 5 years in the first organization allowed you, as you one of the highlights that you mentioned, that you allowed you to really basically enroll and get enrolled and to be honest identified as next leader, right, which ultimately solves two major things. One, gives you a belief that you can evolve yourself as a leader, and while you also experienced how does it, because none of us in our engineering or graduation days are really taught about what management is, right, how to manage or how to become a leader. All of us have their own styles, and to be honest, all of us must have, and as you must have also learned it on the go. There wouldn't have been a technical training or a defined training that you must have experienced, but this gave you a vision, right? So how exactly did you navigate to that, and what is your piece of advice for someone who ideally starting your career? Why is it important to stay 5 years inside an organization and just not jump on off the board very easily?
Yeah, I think again another great question. So as you said, right, that 2 साल में तो company समझ में आती है, and that's a fact, right? So when you join a company, initial 6-8 months are going to go into some sort of ramp ups and trainings, right? Nobody is going to expect that you will join and you will start to be productive from day one. So companies will invest a lot of money into getting you ready for the role for which they have hired you from the college, to be honest. And that training is a good starting point. It's a good boot camp, but it's not enough, right? Because after eight months of that training, also you will still have a lot of questions, right? You will still not be clear on several things. Because what we're taught in college versus what we apply and how we use it to get things done are two very different streams, to be honest, right? One is a very theoretical thing that helps you get through your projects in college, but when you start to apply that in real life work, you have to start to get street smart, right? You have to start getting a sense of what does my customer needs, right? What does my user needs? Is this the right way to do it, or are there better ways to do it? You also have to start building a lot of relationships. So for example, any work, right, and not just software development, none of these works is only one skill trait, right? You can't just be a developer and think that you will only be involved into coding all day and you don't have to do nothing else, right? So that's not possible, because you have to interact with a lot of people. They will be QAs, they will be business analysts, they will be scrum masters, whatnot, users at the end, and all of that. Vendors at time, right? If you are working in a multi kind of a set of team. So interpersonal skills, start to become very important. Something which is not, very, very focused on when you are studying. You have to start understanding relationships. You have to start understanding politics. You have to start understanding, what are the resources available to you. You have to start understanding assets. You have to start understanding liabilities in the teams. You also you have to start preparing for, yourselves. For example, where do you want to go from here, right? So you have to start understanding who can get you there or what can get you there. And then you will have to start balancing your time between current work versus what you want to do in the next, couple of years, and, building relationships, identifying opportunities. So again, work is not limited to, delivering what is delegated to you. You also have to be inquisitive. You also have to be somebody who can take initiative, because then that's what gets you seen, right? Because if you're only focused on your day-to-day jobs, you are not getting focused. Yeah, you're not getting viewed, right? You're not getting seen. To be able to do that and to be able to at least secure promotions, you have to be start seeing, right? So extracurricular work, extracurricular activities, and these days I think CSR is a great way, to get seen or get visibility, or make a meaningful contribution back to the society. I think those things are very important as well. So when you join a company initially, again, as I said, don't take it as a stepping stone, right? That get in, get out in a year, and that's it. No, that's not probably going to give a very good base, very good foundation. My advice will be that if not 5, then at least 3 years is what somebody should look at being in the initial company, and then understand how organizations really work, understand the dynamics, understand what is why is HR important, why is procurement important, why is admin important, right? How do they get things done, and so on and so forth. Even why is IT important? Very important function. So don't ignore them. So I think you need to understand a company in comprehensiveness, right? And just not look them from one lens. That is, I am supposed to be delivering this work, and that's my lens. Those initial 3-5 years are very important to give you a good view on, how can you continue to build career, where you have in the industry where you've gotten yourself in. And that 3 to 5 years is a significant period which should help you, one, get very good clarity as to what do you want to do, in your career. And the rest of the years thereafter, will be focused on basically, reinforcing and strengthening your own profile, your own self, so that you don't become redundant.
Right. So for me, so far, I always mean that more 3 to 5 years, I often categorize that as more of a compounding factor. 2 years is what you get inside, and then suddenly you feel that you understand the business well, or you understand the team equation so well that you start to basically navigating so fast that you predominantly start really contributing. So that I think is one of my so far in the career that I would highlight. But one thing that you mentioned, Samir, was also basically understanding politics, understanding IT, understanding functions, right? And interestingly, your a number of places that you predominantly have highlighted in your spaces around people's management, right? So you evolved yourself from a developer who ideally did not do BC did not do BTech, but BC, and then you evolve yourself to become a manager. And right now you're leading a team, and you've handled teams for more than 100 people, right? So you understand all these dynamics. So I wanted to understand a couple of points here. One, obviously, were there certain kind of learnings that you had that you would like to share? That okay, that could be two aspects. One, that you did it and you understood, and you would not like to repeat it once, or were there also there were some trigger points that really allowed you to express. One of the things that you mentioned in your college days, they went out. We didn't heard of 24/7 computer labs, right? Environment does play a role. So anything in highlight which actually evolved yourself and basically helped you to become from a developer to a manager, and today, to be honest, a leader in its own way, right? Now, I would call you that you're almost managing a city in its own form, right? 100 people company is what we generally call, right, a city. So how can you just help us understand your journey there?
Sure. So I think, one of the important learnings that I drew from the very, beginning of my career was that, um, generally, right, most people in the group or the teams that you're going to be part of, are going to be apprehensive about whether they can take initiatives or not, right? There is this thought process of, people waiting for somebody else to, take that first step, and then, start to doing things, right? And being afraid or being apprehensive about doing that themselves. So if you can be an initiative taker, I think 50% of the challenge is already won. No matter what, no matter where you are, biggest of the brands or wherever, you will only find very little population of the team members who are very comfortable in taking initiatives, right? So if you can take the initiatives, I think you are already set on the path to success. That's my first learning. That was my first learning. Second, I believe is an important learning is that you have to be you can't be jumping. I mean, you can't expect to jump from being an individual contributor or a developer in my case, for example, and then don't expect that after 2 years you will be a manager. Not going to happen, right? If it happens, probably there is something wrong, right? You're not on the right path. Um, when it is time to become a manager, or when it is time to get into management, is something that you must control yourself, right? It should not be that somebody else is making that decision on your behalf, right? So take control of the career, and I think I learned to do that quite early on in my career. So it was not, that my manager would walk in and say, this opportunity has come in and I would like you to get involved, right? Leave everything that you were doing and, move into this role. So that didn't happen with me, and I did not allow that to happen with me, because I had, very clarity. I was very clear in my head as to where do I want to go, right? How do I want to go where I'm going, or where do I wish to be after a certain point in time? So take control of the career, and that probably is something that people, I mean, anybody will learn with experience, right? You can't do that when you are a year one fresher, right? You can't do that. You will have to, get pulled around. You will have to get pushed around, and that is part of the job. That is part of the learning, to be honest. But after a certain time, when you start getting that clarity that, yeah, this is where I see myself in the next 3 to 5 years, start to, bring back control of your career into your hand. So initiative, and then chart your career out. That's an important one. And finally, just finally, you have to identify places where, you can build a career, and where you can't, right? Because both of them are very important as well. So if you decide to, be a long-term guy in the wrong company, probably, it will not yield you results. So you have to be aware. You have to be careful and conscious of what company are you, can you spend your life in, right? Or can you start to build a long-term career in? You can't find that, by merely giving interviews. You can't find that, by reading reviews on Glassdoor. You can't find that by talking to a couple of people who have worked in that company, right? It is something that you will have to experience, right? And at times you have to basically go with your faith, right? So I read on posts, social media, that you should not join a company. You should identify the manager that you want to work with, and so on and so forth. You can't do that, right? In a couple of rounds of interviews, right? So it's a false narrative that is being said, to be honest. You have to experience, and for that you have to have faith, right? So use your experience, use your learnings to be able to identify whether, this company where you are appearing for an interview is really going to be aligned to your career goals or not. And if it doesn't, then, please be very careful and don't make money the only, decision factor.
Interesting. So I actually wanted to go deep in what you were saying. I think you mentioned about taking control of the career, and obviously the reason of why. So any particular red flags, or I would say green flags, that you predominantly have experienced that you would like to share, which allowed you to believe that, okay, this is the place that I continue, or this is a place that I discontinue, or something that is not aligning? Because I understand you somehow had a vision about yourself, right? So what were those, or any framework, if for example you follow anything in that regards?
Two very simple things, to be honest. And one, if your if your seniors are very open about listening what you have to say, that's a great place to be at, right? Not many companies do, right? And another factor is again related. If you are very open to listening, and then, they also give you autonomy and freedom to do something about that, I think that's the place that you must not, ever look out of coming out, to be honest. Most of the times, what matters is everybody has a lot of good ideas in their heads, right? And in my own way, I think I can do wonders for this company. But you can't do it unless, until you can bring out those ideas onto paper and from there into implementation. And you can only do that when you have a supportive management. If you don't have supportive management, if your seniors are not somebody who are, who are very open to listening, who are very open to hearing out what you're thinking, are open to feedback, right? And not doing anything about it, I think that's a very, very big red flag, right? So um, no matter what scale, what size the company is going to be, if your manager if your senior is not somebody who is comfortable listening to feedback or listening to ideas, you can't have a long-term career in that company.
Right. It seems like having a partnership in marriage that you want to say is to be heard and to be understood. If these two qualities are missing, the way that you have a partner with you in front of you, whether it's your wife or husband, if those are red flags in your partnerships. And I think where you don't get these two qualities, I think what Samir explains is have these two as a common trait.
Absolutely.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. So moving on with respect to the fact that now that you've been a part of really building companies, right, and you've handled companies and projects at scale, right, you must have identified a lot of great folks. You would have identified some of the good folks, and to be honest, you might have some of the wrong hires on this whole journey, right? How do you differentiate? How do you ensure that a person who predominantly walks in next in your team is able to be the right person? Obviously, there would be learnings around that as well. So anything that you would like to share?
Yeah, I think technical skills or the skills required for the job are very important. We try not to compromise on them. But I think one of my learnings over the years has been that skills may not always be, the factor basis which you will hire somebody, right? A great attitude and willingness to learn probably is the best thing that you can look in for a new hire, right? In a new hire, and we try to do that, right? And we have now put in place a framework which allows us to do that. So not saying that we still don't make mistakes and hire wrong people, but yeah, the percentage has come down significantly, right? And but we have been able to identify some great people again, who don't carry a great brand like an IIT or something else, but are really really good at what they do, and they are able to align themselves with their goals, with the company's goals and the team's goals, and when you are able to do that, I think that's a great marriage, and that's where you start to see success. So my simple funda when I go to hire is identify people who, if possible, have wonderful skills that you need, but never compromise on a candidate who brings in a great attitude and shows you that he's willing to learn, or he or she is willing to learn and learn and adapt.
So you mentioned about a framework, right? Is it possible to give us an overview of it? How exactly do you run through, or what are the kind of expectations that you mentally have before you start the conversation following that same framework?
Yeah, so see, generally there are very, very fixed kind of roles that we go out and hire for. And they will be in basically either development or QA or cloud engineering or stuff. Associated roles will be in product management or scrum masters and other associated elements. But I think the framework that we bring to use is be very honest about what this candidate is going to be doing when he joins you, when he or she joins you. So we are very, very honest in the job description that we give out, right? That allows people to be absolutely certain about what ways they will expect if they join us. Another thing is that while we are very clear on the expectations from the candidate, we are also very clear on what we should expect when we start getting profiles. So we work with the recruitment team on our side to define a matrix of expectations with regards to what if then or what if when, which means that if we find a candidate who has who is ticking all the boxes on the technical side, then what should become the important thing to measure on for the round two, and how do we go about identifying what traits do we need in for the candidate, whether they are culturally fit or not. So that metrics and the expectation and the honesty, to be honest, are have worked nicely in our favor, which have allowed us to identify good candidates to join the team.
So mainly, it's more about doing your homework first, right? And in terms of really laid down, and do you happen to basically navigate, or have you had any learnings around implementing this particular framework? As in, okay, you started, but ultimately the candidate came in completely different. Any instances of that or anything on that sort?
Um, I'm sorry, I was distracted. What was that question, Jan?
So my question was majorly when you started with majorly implementing the framework that could ideally, where you are trying to say that it's more of a what if and a else statement, right? If this comes, then else this, right? So any gradual any learnings variations that, okay, while you might have started with that particular expectations, but as the candidate comes in, or as you get more profiles, you would have learned something. Anything that you learned in the whole process that you wanted to share while implementing this, or this
I
seems to
think,
be a good way to do that.
yeah, I think that happens all the time, to be honest. So I don't believe, barring a few times when we set out to hire, say, a certain experience level, but then ended up hiring less or more, right? And then we basically accommodated the role accordingly, right? So always happens that ways. It has also happened that we went out hiring a senior full stack developer, and then ended up hiring a product manager, right? So and those are good surprises to have, though not all the times we are able to accommodate such diversity, because we don't have roles, all the different roles open all at the same time. But what governs the direction that we take when we end up into such situations is, how comfortable am I to lose this candidate back to the market, right? So if somebody seems to be bringing in a great different quality than what I set out looking out for, I would still evaluate my options and see, he's not what I'm looking for, or she's not what I was looking for, but they bring in another set of great qualities, right? And they will be a great addition to the team, probably in a different function. But can I do something about them? Can we hire them? Can we bring them on board, right? And then that openness, that reasoning to go beyond, what generally companies are allowed to do, I think it has been a great hallmark for us, and we've been able to do.
So yeah, I think that also presents the fact that a lot of times that we've interviewed and you had, so you went on, as you mentioned, you went on to basically hire a developer, you went on to become a pick up a product manager. I think it's also of the fact that the product manager is maybe bringing the right attitude, if not the 100% skill, right? I think that always is where it takes it forward. Wanted to understand a couple of points here. Also, Samir, is today that let's assume that you've explained what you're hiring, right? And what you're looking to hire. Let's assume that tomorrow Samir goes out, right, and goes and starts its career altogether again. How do you think Samir would prepare? Keeping in mind Samir has seen that particular journey, right? Now, what would Samir do differently? And let's go back to the first question that I had. If Samir is going back to his school, let's assume, I know you want to get this situation out, but yes, if Samir is back to education system and he's now ready to be fresh and joins the corporate world, how exactly and what exactly would Samir do differently?
Yeah, I think that's everybody would like to do that, right? I mean, get a fresh start with all the learnings intact. Um, I think, yeah, I certainly would try and become a better student, in my school. That's for sure. I missed out on a lot of good things, by not doing that. So I would change that, hopefully. Uh, um, College, I wouldn't change anything, to be honest. I would like to start, where I started, and basically relive, every moment there. And by the way, I do that a lot because I'm a very, very regular visitor, to my alma mater. Um, my career, when I'm about to get into the world of working, yeah, there are a few things that I definitely would change. So I probably will, start to build a certain level of increased expectation for myself. Right. So the situation where I was in back in 2005, when I started working, it was very different because the first priority for me was to get placed, was to get a job, so that I can, become that additional member, now earning in the family. I would probably, give that a lesser priority now if I start again. I would rather like to, identify those very specific areas where where I now, think that I would have wanted to start my careers in, and not make a compromise on that. At least, not for the initial couple of years. Um, I would have probably opted for, say, a smaller company, lesser pay, but if it was getting me into the domain where I wanted to be. For example, I wanted to always program in C. So I wanted to work in assembly and, maybe low level programming and, uh, you know, that side of work, rather than, becoming an application developer, for example. So that was the priority too. So I would not make compromise there. And I think during the careers, when I reached, say, the stage where I was constantly being pushed to getting into managerial roles, or I was seeing a lot of opportunity in that area, I would probably spend a bit more time being an individual contributor, because I believe the technical skills that you garner in the early periods of your time, they are the skills that enable you to enable you to become a very good people manager, right? Because your team generally will come looking up to you, to be able to solve technical problems, because for people management, people related issues, there is HR, but they will look up to you more as a senior who can help them, better in the day-to-day, work that they're supposed to be doing. And I think, while I do that nicely, but, I think, there is an area where I would have liked to do that better. So I would probably spend more time as an individual contributor. And finally, probably, I would be, more, I would do more networking. I started doing networking quite late, in my career. But I think, with the opportunities and options available these days, we can start to do as early as possible, or as early as I want, really. So I would do that early on. And I think those three things are something that I would change. Otherwise, I couldn't have asked for more.
Interesting. So I think networking seems one of the highlights of this community that we run called Rebased, because we also understood that naturally all developers like us, though we are also engineers, do not have that flair to really go out and say a hi to everyone. And we somehow need certain platforms. And to be honest, a lot of us never ever evolve ourselves to really believe in network unless we look back and see. So maybe Samir would not actually do that and understand the power of network that it has until unless he sees an 18 years industry. But that's something that I think is a shout out for everyone, that yeah, you need to actively network, join communities and really be there. I think it will create a magic which will take years to build, but it will have an absolutely astounding impact in days to come.
That's true.
Interesting. So I think these were my questions, Samir. I'll just take up the questions that has come from the viewers back then. I think one of the questions that remains is which I think I would love you to answer is how to create consistent feedback loops with team members as a new engineering manager. I think a lot of us evolve, right? And you might have seen managing teams. So how do you ensure that you continuously being fed upon, and how do you create that atmosphere that you understand whether you're taking the right role, you're taking the right direction? Because initially everyone has that apprehension whether he's taking in the right step. So how do you create that ecosystem altogether?
Yeah, I think I mean, what I do is generally, so I believe and I act as a facilitator most of the time, right? So I don't really start to, interfere or intervene in the work that, my team members are supposed to be doing. And that is important because, not getting into micromanagement is the best thing that, a manager can really do. um, Feedback loops, there is no right or a wrong way of doing it. Is the fact that you need those feedback loops to be in place. You can create those. I mean, what I do is generally, we set up touch points right? And we set up these touch points at various levels of personnel. These touch points are important, and then they are very important interfaces to have the feedback coming in. Feedback coming in as in, what is working, what is not working, what can we be doing better, what are the skills that a certain individual is bringing to the team that have not been put to good use, for example, and how can we start to leverage those skills, or what are some of the skill areas where people need improvement on, and how can we start to help them to become self-reliant and become better in those. um, those loops may be formal, may be informal, but I think the ecosystem that you start to build around yourself has to contain people who are, one, aligned to the thought process that you bring, to the vision that you have, and are able to help you further enhance that ecosystem. So you have to identify skill set where you basically have to identify people who are good at doing what they do, right? And then play to the powers. So identify who you can depend on for a certain thing, and then leave them free so that they can start to build their own small ecosystem. And as you enable people to do that, I think the feedback will start to flow in. It could be feedback which is top down, and it will be feedback which is bottoms up. And all of that feedback is important for the manager to really be aware of. Now you can't interrogate people to get that feedback, but you just have to be patient. You just have to be friendly. You just have to be genuine and honest to be able to hear that feedback really nicely. Most of the time, we have seen that there are some managers who are who have a different perception about how should this be working, and then anybody who says something else, or not aligned to that, they are not very open to listening. And I think that's the worst thing that a manager can do. So be open, be honest, into bringing in the change that you are trying to do, and be very, very vocal about um, saying the good things or recognizing the good things that your team members are doing. Right? We are very critical at times. Feedback is important. I don't say that's not important to be given, but recognition is at the same time even more important. So identify people, recognize them for the good things that they're doing, and when people see that you're recognizing them for things that they're doing well, I think they will be more open, more comfortable talking to you about things which are not good.
Right. The way you mentioned about the manager not open to basically do stuff in other ways reminds me of the math teacher who only wanted us to solve in the same format and didn't want to change the format even if we tried, right? So I think interesting, goes back to those days. I think it was a great session, Samir. While we wrap up, I just wanted to quickly highlight that what I personally learned today, and it seems to be something that actually would be something that the viewers would also carry back. I think one of the major highlights that you explained through the journey is a backbencher can be a front bencher in corporate. So don't rule out if the guy is not really basically pulling up his socks during his school days. That seems to be a good learning for all of us to believe in. I think the second thing which you basically explained, and I think kudos to you and your family and your teachers to really convert your majorly your limitations into a blessing. So blessings in disguise is something that will come in. We just have to trust the environment, and as you mentioned, stars will make it happen for you. So believe in it, and I think as it's rightly said in our Indian cultures, blessings is what you need. So as much as you collect, your stars will fall in place. I think that's something that is really extraordinary to hear what you did today. The third important thing that I learned, and you explained it extremely well, that if you are looking to really evolve yourself from a manager, you need to do two or three major things, right? One definitely is take initiatives, go beyond your regular role. As you also mentioned about how exactly if you're an IC and tomorrow you expect the organization or the management at large to start believing that you'll become a team member, that seems really not possible. So while you're taking initiative, you need to come out and really evolve and become a team member. And I think what you also mentioned about is to have certain clarities in place in terms of career path, right? You should know what you need. As you mentioned, you might not know that it would be translucent when you start your career, but at least have a 3 or 4 year kind of a basically timeline. Don't be harsh on yourself to expect that on day one. But yeah, as you spend 2, 3 to 4 years in your career, ideally 5 in your career, you would be knowing what you like, what you dislike, and when you would actually take it. And then it's time for you to really own your career, make decisions, make hard decisions, make good decisions for yourself. And I think that's been something that I think has been a major 4 learnings that I had from today's session. Anything you would like to add, Samir?
I think you covered it nicely. One thing which I believe, we engineers don't give enough emphasis on is, your communication skills. And I think that's a significant factor, or that can be a significant factor in opportunities coming your way. So do not ignore, the communication skills. Don't ignore, those presentation trainings that you might be getting invited to. Do attend those and work on the communication skills, right? So it's a given that, when you work with people from different geographies or different, cultures, etc., they realize that they know that, the language that you're using, mostly English, is not your first language, it's not your native language. They understand and they accommodate, but then that should not absolve us of the responsibility that, as an owner of, being able to communicate something effectively, I should not lose any loose ends, right? So don't ignore the communication skills, right? Written, verbal, presentation skills, very important, and they start to become significant, as you grow up the ladder. So if you're not good at, the base, at least, prepare and be good at, by the time you reach where, speaking and writing becomes more important than writing code.
True, absolutely. That's what leaders are expected to basically do. I think it was a great evening, Samir. Really appreciate the fact that you were in between of meetings and you took out time. Extremely happy to have you. Hope to have you again. It was a great session with you. Thanks a lot, Samir, for joining
Thank you so
in.
much, Dan. Thank you, Rebase.
Okay.